Hello and welcome. Are you new to RVing? Do you want to travel this year?
Today we're going to talk about assessing your RV readiness. So as possibly a new RVer or someone who doesn't RV all the time, are you really confident in your RV and do you know everything about it so that when you add your RV travel to your adventure that you're really confident and successful when you go down the road? Well, stay tuned with us because we're going to talk some more about that today. The RV life. We're surrounded with the message that it's a life you have to wait until retirement to have and a life that only some can afford. And while it might be reality for those who want to believe that's true, we're on a mission to change that mindset and help people to stop wondering and start wandering to create a life they love.
Join us in conversations about how to design your RV life. We're Bryan Luann Street, and this is the RV Living Show.
Well, welcome back to another RV Living Show. We're really excited you're joining us today. We are going to be talking about assessing your RV readiness. But if you have questions or comments or anything that you want to talk about at the end of this episode, you can post them in the comments and we will talk about them when we're done.
We'll go over them.
We will. So what does it mean to assess your RV readiness, right? It really means to identify some of the ways that maybe you're not as confident in your RV life as you want to be. And that can be anything from what we're going to cover today, the 3 tips, to a whole lot more. And we'd be open to some conversation later. So Bryan wants to tell us.
Yeah, the best way to assess your RV readiness is to understand where your inexperience lies and how to improve it. That's an important statement because we all start out in an adventure as newbies.
We do. We're completely new to all of this. And as you do progress in your RV life, there's still new things to learn about, and you may trade to a new rig. And
even with new rigs, even though you may have a lot of the same systems, they may operate differently.
Yeah, so let's talk today. The first thing we want to talk about is to think about safety first when you're assessing your RV readiness.
Yeah, this is one thing, we're excited. We want to hit the road. And a lot of times safety is just kind of like out of mind. We don't think about it. But it is important as RVers that we really do think about safety. We're in a little travel trailer or RV, whatever it is. We got to think about like fire safety. Are we sure that our fire, like our smoke detectors are working properly?
In fact, as we were getting ready to do this, Bryan went around and tested all of ours, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, we need to know that. Like, especially when you're weekend camping and maybe occasional camping and you're not in it all the time, those things you just want to hop in and you want to go have a good time.
Right, you're not thinking about that. And they're easy to test. It just, we've got to remember to test them.
Yes.
To start them. Another thing to think about is very important is your tires.
Yeah.
You really think about it. There's so much riding on our tires when we go down the road. It's like, are they properly inflated, or is the age good on them? There's just so much to tire safety that we can't go over in this particular episode. But it's really something to think about. Do this before you hit the road.
So we were driving somewhere yesterday, and Bryan says to me, "I think we need new tires on our Jeep." And I'm like, really? I don't feel like we've driven that much on them. And he read off the mileage to me, and I'm like, well, I don't think we need them yet. He says, well, then you need to add the mileage of the RV because we tow it down the road. And I'm like, you'd think, duh, you'd think about that. But no, you can't count on the mileage on your vehicle when you're towing it. Now, if you have a fifth wheel and you're driving your truck, that's completely different, right? Because you know that mileage is correct because you're always, that vehicle's always moving and counting that mileage. So anyway, that was kind of interesting thing that, that light bulb moment.
The things we think about when we're going down the road.
Yeah. The other thing I want to say about safety and, as more of a new RVer as you're getting started, if you don't know what your smoke alarm sounds like or your CO2 detector, what that sounds like, if you did have an alarm for some reason, you don't know what it's alarming you to. And of course you would get up and you would try to figure that out. But you know, it's just that whole newness of where you are in your RV, or a new RV to you that you would, you know, just want to know about all the safety things. And like Bryan said, the fire extinguishers, we actually have a couple of these in our RV, the small ones, because the big one is up by the front. And so if I had a fire in the kitchen, I would have to run up there, I'd have to unhook the strap, and I'd have to figure it out. Well, these little ones you can put in different places.
Stick it right underneath the cabinet, one in the bedroom.
And this one actually came from underneath our counter. And it's so much less intimidating to use. So if I happen to have a fire in my kitchen, a grease fire or whatever, it's just point and spray instead of that big one with that lever on it, and just the whole, it's kind of overwhelming. You wouldn't use that all the time. This is kind of like hairspray. Oh, well, don't put it on yourself. But
yeah, no,
it's easier to use.
Also, make sure you have a fire extinguisher outside in an unlocked compartment as well.
Yeah, for when you're grilling, right? Because, you know, that grill catches on fire. Or even people who are towing their vehicles, if they happen to have a fire from either towing or their engine or something, if you had one outside, you could really, you know, just pull it out quickly and use that. So we really like the little ones. We found those on Amazon.
Yeah, just thinking a little bit about safety ahead of time, you know, then you have peace of mind when you go down the road.
That's right. So the next thing, when you're assessing your RV readiness, sometimes we're nervous when we're driving and handling our RV. So that's something to really think about. Maybe you need to improve your skills in this area.
Yeah, you know, as a new RVer, we all, like I said, we all start out as newbies. Many of us may be buying an RV for the first time. Maybe we've never towed a trailer, or maybe we've never drove a big truck or something similar to the size of an RV. You know, yes, we're going to learn these skills as we go down the road, but, you know, we always teach people to, you know, take some time when you get that new RV and go somewhere it's less intimidating, go to like a parking lot, set up some cones and practice backing that RV up, practice making some corners. You know, spend some time out there, because when you take your RV into the campground for the first time, you know, this can, you know, you have a lot of people in there, it can be tight quarters. If you've never really experienced backing an RV up, you know, this can be a very challenging as well as a very intimidating moment.
And honestly, this comes from lots of experience that we're speaking about.
Right.
Our first RV trip, you know, Bryan did a great job, thank goodness, because that campground we went into, our very first campground, was so tight, and we happened to get in there in dark, which is another thing that you're not supposed to do. It was nerve-wracking. I mean, insanely nerve-wracking trying to back that thing up.
We made all the mistakes that we could make on this particular first trip, and we can tell you all about them. But you really want to just take your time. You know, I know you're anxious to get on the road, but if you're picking up your RV for the first time, take some time. Spend some time packing it, driving it, getting used to it before you get in that campground. Maybe even talk about some driver training as well. Yes,
you know, if after you've done that introduction for yourself in that parking lot with your cones, you know, make sure you set up the cones like maybe it's a campground, a campsite. You know, it's long enough, it's wide enough, the angle at which you would turn in. You know, you're practicing all that. And let's say you're still really nervous about doing some of these things. Driver training can help a lot, and there is no shame in driver training. Yeah. It actually helps point out things that you would be more confident at after you take it, because it promotes that awareness. And the big thing for me, driver training helps you understand where your markers are on your RV, because while you may be able to see it, you know, there's depth perception, the rig is bigger, and sometimes you're driving down the road and somebody's passing you and you may be on a little narrow lane. Well, if you have the markers on your RV and know, well, if I line this up here and I'm driving down and it's lined up on the side of the road, then I'm passing that person. I'm feeling a lot more safe. And that's kind of a flashback to driver's ed, that, you know, actually that's how I learned in driver's ed. Okay. You know, set your car up on that, but on that, the side of the road, but in your RV, you're bigger. Like the markers aren't the same. You have to figure that out. And driver training is really great. Get your mirrors right. get that whole perspective going.
Yeah,
And
when you get to training, like I say, we're all starting out new. We all got to learn to drive these rigs. Get that training up front. Then when you hit the road and you actually are traveling, that maybe that first campground after you had the training, you understand your RV. It's just going to be so much better, really, because you'll have more confidence. You'll feel better when you get to the campground. It can actually make or break your vacation.
Yeah, because that confidence does translate into more enjoyment. The confidence of assessing where you are in your skills for the RV life it just really helps you enjoy everything a whole lot better.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about backing up, parking, and our next advice is practice, practice, practice. Maybe you don't want to go so far from home in the beginning, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But first, we're going to get a word from our sponsor. This episode of the RV Living Show is brought to you by the Complete RV Travel Planner, the only travel planner made specifically for the RV lifestyle. Get yours today at rvtravelplanner.com. Is to learn your RV systems, right? Your RV systems are really different from things that you may have ever used in your life. If you're not a seasoned RVer, you come in and you're like, oh, your whole water system is completely different than like in your house. So,
right. You're going to have to take some time. Like we talked about, RVs are different. Your water systems are different. Your electrical systems work a little differently. That's why we always suggest, and we're going to be talking about this, go when you pick up your RV, yes, they're going to give you a walk through your RV. Most of the time they'll go, it's a quick walkthrough. They'll try to explain some things to you, but it's a lot of information to really take in all at one time.
Yeah,
There's just a lot of information. Now, we don't suggest to get in that RV and take it for like a long trip, because you really need to practice. Take that to a local campground, and we'll say something very close to where you're at, like your local campground, and set it up and practice with everything in there. Practice running your air conditioner. Practice turning your heat on and off. Learn all the water. Learn how to use it when you're hooked up to city water. How to use it when you have to use your water pumps. Learn about all the different functions of the black tank and the gray tank.
And the noises, like everything makes different noises, and you're not sure, is that normal? Oh, I hear that. Is that normal? Your water pump's on. Oh, that sounds weird. Oh, no, that's normal, So
yeah, try to identify where these noises are coming from, and spend some time doing this. We've actually seen people who will take their new camper to a campground and set it up, and leave it there for several days. Not even stay in it, but just come every day and practice with some different systems. We've seen that from time to time. It's just like you're learning something new. But once you get all this down pat and you know how everything works, then when you're, like you say, you've got your driver's training, you got your RV ready, and you hit that road for the first time, it's going to make life so much more enjoyable.
It really is. And so your confidence is going to grow, and then your RVing is going to just feel better and more enjoyable, because you don't want to be nervous driving. You don't want to be nervous wondering if you're going to be able to get your slides in case something, went wrong. Knowing where your emergency thing is to bring in your slides is peace of mind. So you don't have to think about, well, if that malfunctions, how am I going to do it? There are a few key things that where your breakers are. If you take time to figure that out.
I put a note on here.
Okay.
To bring it up. So
yep.
Take a look at that.
Here's the tip.
Very tip. Learn. Actually, just talking about the breakers. Learn where all your breakers are, guys. This is so important. You've got. Remember, RVs are different. You have a 12-volt system. You have a 120-volt system, like your house. And they're all going to have little different breaker panels. Learn where these are. Spend some time. They'll probably show you, if you do a walkthrough, where they're located. If they don't, ask them. So this is very important. And spend some time. Read what the breakers do, because if a water pump goes out, you want to know where to go and be able to turn that back on. Another thing that's very important is your GFI circuit. They will trip. And they trip a lot, just as an RV, and they're designed to trip as a safety reason. But they're simple to reset if you know where to reset it. I've been in different RVs, and trying to find that little reset button sometimes can be challenging because if you don't know where to look. Look for it while you're not in a campground. Understand where this thing is, and then it's going to save you a headache down the road.
For sure. It really, all of this is about peace of mind. It really is. It all relates back to if you identify where you have inexperience and need to learn and grow, then you can totally, take time to do that and then make everything that much better for yourself.
Right. Speaking, thinking about the RV, run your jacks up and down. Learn to re-level your RV. Practice doing it different ways. The more you use that RV, the more comfortable you're going to be with it. And also the fact once you learn how everything works, it's going to be very easy to go to a campground and set up camp and immediately start enjoying yourself.
Yes, that's for sure. Well, those are our tips for today. We are going to come back next week, same time, same place. We're going to jump in here in the comments in a minute, but next week we're going to be talking about how to know if 2021 is your year to go full-time. Maybe you've been thinking about it. Maybe you haven't thought of it, but you have this idea that you want to do it someday. So be sure to join us next week on that RV Living Show.
Okay.
Well, good. Thank you guys for joining us today. We've enjoyed having you on live, and those of you who are going to be watching on the replay, you can also post, if you have questions about what we talked about today, you can post them in the comments and we will come back to answer them. So we just wanted to say thank you again for joining us,
Yes,
and
thank you.
We will see you next week.
Thank you for joining us for the RV Living Show. We hope this episode helps you in creating an RV life you love.
Until next time, we encourage you to stop wondering and start wandering.